Hello everyone and welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a political news show where I discuss the American political news of the week. So we have a lot to talk about as always, but as the title suggests, I want to turn toward the Democrats for a little while. And we have spent a lot of time talking about what Republicans are up to in the last few months, but let's turn to the opposition party as they are hoping to rebuild heading into the 2028 election. Recently, the chair and vice chairs of the DNC were elected to a 4-year term and will help lead Democrats into the midterm elections and beyond. Let me just say I'm not impressed by the results of these elections. David Hogg was elected one of the vice chairs, the 24-year-old who uses the fact that he was a victim of a school shooting for political purposes. It's absolutely disgusting, but that's not important right now. What I do want to note is a tweet that he stated from 2022. He wrote, quote, "Like, I'm already one of the most politically toxic people in the country. Any politician doing anything with me is in effect committing political suicide. You already are barking up the wrong tree if you think I'll ever have the power to impact anything." And that's the end of the quote. That was on April 16th, 2022. He also wrote tweets that said over the last 5 years or so, abolish ICE, defund the police, not the USPS, the NRA needs to be designated a terrorist organization for their role the supporters played in staging an insurrectionist coup, and other things. Oh, no, he also said, unlike COVID, there's no vaccine for preventing climate change. Once we start feeling the impacts, we can just implement and survive, and there's only one solution: prevention. Needless to say, this is not something that one of the DNC vice chairs should be saying. This is something a blue-haired college student would say to his friends inside of the art building just after they can finish complaining about their mental illnesses. Believe me, I've seen it. David Hogg is not a serious person. I'm sorry if you like him, but he just wants attention and he's a grifter. He probably cares about the causes that he talks about, but he probably likes the attention way more, and I can tell when somebody just wants attention, and that is David Hogg. Needless to say, I don't like him, and if a Democrat was similar to him, was made the nominee in 2028, they would lose in a landslide. Well, maybe not landslide, but they would lose pretty badly, and I wouldn't vote for them. The DNC chair himself, Ken Martin, he was just elected, taking over Jamie Harrison. Before he was elected, refused to say that gender transition surgeries for illegal immigrants in prison should not be allowed. And remember, this question was asked by another Democrat, not a Republican. So you can't say this was a culture war question, or this was asked by a grifter, or this is not important. Why are they trying to stump him? Like, what's going on here? This was for a reason. This was an ad that Trump used against Kamala Harris, and it was a highly effective ad. They actually spent over a third of their budget on it. And according to polling and internal polling that the Democrats themselves had, this ad was very, very effective. The DNC chair candidates were asked, do you believe that race and gender had an impact on the 2024 election? And all of them raised their hands. Obviously, this is bullshit. Kamala was not a stellar candidate. She came from an unpopular administration amid a time that the culture was shifting to the right, not to the left. And she was also a terrible speaker. It came out on CBS that she conducted an interview where she sounded really good, but they cut out almost all of her answer. So she would give this 2-minute long rambling answer, and then cut out like 10 seconds of it, and then that would be the part that they show, and everything else they would cut it out. And that has finally come out. That was released just last week. So what can we glean from this whole experience? Well, Democrats have clearly learned no lesson from the past election, and at least publicly, they are not changing anything of what went wrong to prevent it from happening again. The first step to fixing a problem is to admit there is one, and Democrats are not admitting there is a problem. As of right now, I expect J.D. Vance to be president in 2029, because unless Democrats are able to strengthen their message and appeal, then they're toast. They're done. They ran against one of the most unpopular Republican nominees in recent history, and they still lost, which shows you just how bad it is. Their defense of USAID, which I'm going to talk about later, shows just how out of touch they are. I'd love to do an episode on what Democrats' strategy should be, but basically I think they need to go back to an old school inspiring/attractive candidate such as Obama or Clinton and be broadly moderate but also have aspects that appeal to progressives so that they aren't alienated. Kamala's message was very confused. She was formerly the most liberal senator in the country, pretending to be a moderate while also coming from the left-wing Biden administration and and has her relatively left-wing vice presidential pick, while also trying to get support from Republicans like Dick and Liz Cheney. So if Democrats are going to move forward, they need to decide what they're going to support, what they don't support, and they need to pose a credible opposition to Donald Trump and the populist MAGA movement. And I'll just throw out there, whenever Kamala tried to bring in like these other Republicans, that only made me like her less and less. Once I found out Dick Cheney endorsed her and Liz Cheney endorsed her, I was like, all right, this is not somebody I'm a big fan of. Even the New York Times released an article titled, "We Have No Coherent Message." And Democrats struggle to oppose Donald Trump. So that's the title, where they interview 50 Democratic leaders. I don't know who these people are, and they reported that while they want to provide an inspirational message from the party, they don't know what to do. The New York Times reported, quote, "In private meetings and at public events, elected Democrats appear leaderless, rudderless, and divided," end quote. Of course, it's early days, but so far the signs don't seem very good. Republicans should definitely take advantage of their disorganized opposition, and it seems that Trump has understood this, knowing that there's at most 4 years left in his presidency, and considering recent events, it could actually be a lot less. As for the administration itself, I'd like to talk about more what happened in the last week after the conclusion of last week's 2 episodes. If you want an update on the tariff situation, please check out my previous 2 episodes, the latter of which is only about 5 minutes long, so it's very digestible. It explains kind of where we are. And since then, there really has not been much of an update. Last week, in perhaps the biggest news of the week, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu visited Trump at the White House. Biden denied him a White House visit during his term, but Trump is clearly more willing to work with Netanyahu, which is something we knew before the election. Most controversially, though, Trump suggested America take over Gaza and relocate everybody else who lives there to somewhere else. He said of this proposal, everyone loves it, and let me say this is not the case. Almost nobody likes it. It has received international condemnation, and Palestinians are feeling a forced relocation similar to the one in 1948. Now, this is basically ethnic cleansing. That's what this is. It's where you basically wipe out an entire group of people, and that's basically what the goal is. The only step the one step short of it was you're not going to kill them, you would just deport them, but that's still very close to ethnic cleansing, if not is ethnic cleansing. I'll leave that for the lawyers to decide. Trump's vision is to turn Gaza into the, quote, Riviera of the Middle East, where people can live happily ever after nearly 8 decades of conflict. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, obviously praised the news as historic and outside the box, but this is anything but. This would be exactly what we tried to do in Iraq and Afghanistan, and look what happened there. Then, all of a sudden, Trump U-turned and said Israel would handle this rebuilding, which is, in the eyes of Palestinians and Arabs, only slightly better. And I'm sure, regardless of whoever it is, they are not too thrilled to have foreign troops on their land. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, has said another idea is for Gazans to temporarily relocate while construction and debris clearing occur. Now, of course, the Palestinians are like, well, why can't we just move to one area while you fix part of it, and then we move to that area, and then you fix the other part? Of course, Trump's comments make this even less likely to occur, because now they're like, all right, well, we're going to take it over and get rid of everybody there. And once they hear that, even if you change the plan, now they're going to be like, wait a second, weren't you just talking about getting rid of us? No offense, Gaza is a hellhole. I don't know why anybody would want to live there. I mean, it really is a prison. They basically get no rain. It's absurdly hot in the summer. It's not nearly as hot as like Sudan or something, but it gets pretty hot. And there's really no resources there. There's no oil. There's no minerals. There's nothing there. There's really nothing there. I mean, I guess it's somewhat pretty, but considering what it looks like now, I don't know why anybody would want to live there. Needless to say, I don't think we're actually an invasion of the Gaza Strip would ever actually happen, either by the U.S. or even by Israel. And this would be deeply unpopular on all sides of the political spectrum. The left would hate it for obvious reasons, but I think many of the people on the populist right would also hate it because Trump pledged to be America first, not Gaza first. He clearly wants to end the war, and I think the best way to do that is to call up the Prime Minister and say, you need to end this war right now, or we are not going to support you in any way, shape, or form in the future. And if he refuses, then you cut off all ties. You withdraw your military support, your economic support, and you cut diplomatic ties, and you sanction Israel. You say, we're done. We're done here. We did everything you asked us to do. You're still going. We don't want a part of this anymore. At this point, Israel has broken so many international laws, and it is absurd. Iraq violated 2 international laws, and they got invaded. Israel has violated dozens. Bombing hospitals and schools is never acceptable under any circumstance. Targeting civilians, while might be a good strategy, is against international law, and it's abhorrent. There's a concept in war that instead of striking at the enemy, you strike at the people supporting the enemy. And that's clearly not working here. And even if it was working, it would still not be right. Just to be clear, there was never going to be an invasion of the Gaza Strip. I can 100% guarantee you that. And until Trump changed, I was still going to say that in the script. If we couldn't build a port to deliver supplies, which the Biden administration tried to do a year ago, then we aren't going to be able to land troops. It's not going to happen. Anyway, just like many people, I want to see this conflict end, just like the war in Ukraine. Speaking of foreign countries, the quote-unquote president of El Salvador, and I'll explain why I call him the president, has offered to take any convicted criminal deported by the United States. President Bukele of El Salvador, his full name is Nayib Bukele, he extended this offer on Monday, a week ago. Many people probably missed it because of the tariff news, and it did win praise from Marco Rubio. Of course, the El Salvadorians are not going to do this for free. They want a small fee, whatever that'll be. And this doesn't just extend to El Salvador citizens. They're willing to take any undocumented criminal of any nationality, including American. They're willing to take U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents. Now, I think this is a fantastic idea. I don't think we should deport U.S. citizens, to be clear. U.S. citizens or green card holders or other permanent legal residents. But if they want to take anybody else, I'm happy to send them over. Now, you might wonder, if you're not well-versed on international politics, you might wonder, well, why El Salvador? All right, that's like you might as well throw a dart on the map and you land on El Salvador. Well, Nayib Bukele is not really a president, if you haven't catch my drift yet. He's really a dictator. He's officially a president, and if you look him up, it'll say he's a president, but he's a dictator, and he admitted it. His Twitter bio once said, "World's coolest dictator," and his country has been completely beset by criminal violence for decades, and he has thrown many of them in jail without a trial, just rounding them up and throwing them in prison. It is so bad that some people have family members who are rounded up and thrown in prison, and they still support him because at least it's safer now than it was before. The Constitution of El Salvador barred him from running again last year for re-election, but he canceled that. The Supreme Court of El Salvador, which he has influence over, said, oh, he's good, he can run again. And run again he did. He won over 80% of the vote. According to Freedom House, which is El Salvador, which studies the various freedoms in the world in various different countries, they report that El Salvador's elections are largely credible and free, but cites widespread corruption, undermining democracy, and the rule of law remains a problem. So it's safe to assume, well, El Salvador is not like perfect. It was a free and fair election. Bukele remains popular in El Salvador, and therefore he could be a strong ally to Donald Trump in the United States at a time when Venezuela and Mexico and Brazil remain hostile. As for the deportations themselves, it appears Donald Trump is not happy with the pace of deportations, and this is no surprise at all. It was always going to be impossible to deport 1 million people a year, at least at first. ICE detention centers are already at 109% capacity, which means they are full and overfilled. Tom Homan, the border czar, said they are working on increasing bed capacity. Not only do they need to increase bed capacity, they need to increase the number of judges we can deport. Otherwise, these people we're going to have to pay for them all to sit around for months or maybe even years and be sheltered and feed, and we're going to pay for their legal defense and their housing. It's going to be insane. So this is a multifaceted problem, and will definitely require additional congressional funding. Now, I do want to say, according to NBC, though, this is a good news, and this is something that the president's supporters would say is working. They've said that according to NBC, that the number of migrants, because they were on the border, they didn't see anybody. They were there for hours. So the amount of people crossing into the country has dropped dramatically, at least according to circumstantial evidence and anecdotal evidence. We'll have to wait and see for the numbers. So it appears, it's early, but the administration's efforts to stop the flow is working. But the next part is going to be much, much harder. As for foreign aid, I do want to mention the closing of USAID, which I talked about a little bit earlier. They manage a $44 billion budget and provide humanitarian aid to other countries. Of course, I think this should be shut down. We need to provide American humanitarian aid to the people of Florida, North Carolina, California right now, instead of sending money to Ukraine, to Israel, Gaza, Africa, Latin America, Asia. Elon Musk and Trump have committed to shutting down the department, which will be very difficult without congressional support. In my opinion, we should not be sending a dime overseas until we are running a federal surplus, which we haven't done since 2001. That was 24 years ago. Musk boasted on Twitter that he spent the weekend, so this would have been last weekend, not the one that just ended. He spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper, and indeed he has. And work and spending has stopped, the leadership and staff have been completely gutted, and the website is offline. Yes, the department still exists, but in name only. It's like an abandoned building now with a sign that doesn't even turn on. And I think they even took the letters off the building. Congressional Democrats are obviously outraged, but there's very little more they can do other than potentially file a lawsuit. And as I hinted earlier, defending of USAID shows just how much out of touch Democrats are. One of the first things that people say they want to do is cut foreign aid. I'm not saying that they should support these cuts, Democrats, but I'm saying this is not a hill to die on. And it really allows Trump to say they support the rest of the world and I support you. According to the Brookings Institute, much of the country believes that 25% of the federal budget goes to foreign aid. And that's not true. It's nowhere close to true. It's less than 1%. But if that's what they believe, and they hear that Democrats are defending it, oh boy, their Dems are in big trouble. I'm not going to get into what USAID does really that much because I don't think that's super important for this discussion. But I'm just going to mention they give targeted support for 120 countries. And now medication and other goods are now stuck in port. Some of them have expired because they can't be delivered. And this probably could have been handled a little bit better, but I'm glad to say that it's been done. I do want to provide a balanced perspective here. Maybe you don't know much about USAID and you want to know, okay, well, that's your opinion. What's the other side? The other side is U.S. foreign aid is basically a very good way to buy countries' support. If we don't aid them, China and Russia may increase their own influence in the countries. They could either add more funding or they could even just maintain their current levels. And these countries, they could say, all right, well, the United States isn't supporting us, and if you are, then we're going to support you. So a good example of this is sort of the Belt and Road Initiative of the last decade. So where we have not provided support to certain countries, China has. They stepped in and filled in the gap. Now, in my opinion, the Belt and Road Initiative has completely collapsed, but that's a story for another time. If you're more interested in looking that up, I recommend you find some information online about that. But this could potentially hurt our ability to stop the spread of diseases, for example. George W. Bush was credited with saving 20 million lives in Africa and elsewhere from various diseases like Ebola. So if another disease does pop up somewhere, we would be more vulnerable than we would have been before. So that's kind of the other side. However, if Trump wants to make all of this permanent, the $44 billion roughly that they get needs to be wiped out of the federal budget, and that is due in March. With full control of Congress, this shouldn't be a problem, even with narrow majorities. It seems that most of the Republicans are on side with this, and if that's what they want to do, then I think they can do it. They could possibly try to tie the abolition of the department entirely, not just on paper, with the government funding bill, although there could be some legal issues with that. But they will also get another opportunity in September when the federal budget is due for the 2026 year. Remember, we haven't even started 2025 yet, but more on that in the future. So Well, on a slightly different note, 65,000 federal workers have reportedly taken the buyout that I talked about in the previous episode, and the buyout program's on pause because it is facing legal challenges. That doesn't surprise me. Where's the money coming from a buyout? I don't know. Congress has to approve that. The government can't just spend it. So really, USAID and other departments are being gutted from the inside out, and reportedly defense and education are next. As for the cabinet nominations, the two most controversial, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, they are yet to be confirmed. So far, Susan Collins has said she will vote for Tulsi Gabbard to be DNI, but she has not said how she will vote on RFK Jr. as of the reporting of this episode. She is an important senator because she is one of the few remaining moderates on both sides in the Senate, and she's also up for re-election next year in a blue-leaning state, during a year where Democrats are expected to do well, notwithstanding their current issues. RFK Jr.'s nomination was narrowly advanced after Senator Bill Cassidy voted for the nomination, but this doesn't mean he will be approved on the floor. If I was in his shoes, Bill Cassidy's, I would have done the same thing. I would have allowed a floor vote. If he voted against it and sunk Kennedy's nomination, then it would all be his fault. But if he allows a floor vote and a bunch of other Republicans go against him, then the blame can be shared around. And if you've never noticed, whenever somebody says, oh, this is all our fault, or we all take the blame for this, that means nobody takes the blame. So if everybody takes the blame, nobody takes the blame, which makes it easy in cases like this, where it can say, all right, well, let's try to spread the blame around. Was that his calculation? Maybe, but that's the calculation I would have made. Of course, the trade-off is now that there's a good shot he's going to be confirmed. I would say there's a 90% chance, unless things change. I'm against this confirmation for reasons I said in the previous episode, the previous main episode. So we'll have to wait and see. We should know by the end of this week and the beginning of next week. Lastly, I want to turn to Doge, which has become increasingly controversial. In fact, on Friday, senators' offices were overwhelmed with calls about Elon Musk. WAPO reported that constituents have flooded the phone lines at the U.S. Capitol this week, many of them asking questions about billionaire Elon Musk, quote, feeding a USAID into the wood chipper, and his access to government systems. No, I haven't said much about Elon Musk because we don't really know that much about him. Yeah, we know about his businesses and his success, but on a personal level, we really don't know that much, especially about politics. What does this guy really believe? I mean, he's not a conservative by any means. He has kids with multiple different women, and he treats humans like they're disposable. And I don't just mean in a Gilded Age way. I'm talking about like humans need to reproduce, and we need to make the population go up. That's not how you talk about human beings. That's how you talk about animals. He's creepy. I would say he's almost as creepy as Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, maybe even more so. Republican senators like Lisa Murkowski, they have, and Angus King of Maine, he is a independent, has said they are constantly hearing about constituents. Lisa Murkowski said they receive 600 calls a minute. That does surprise me, 600 calls a minute, because she's from Alaska. How many people are calling her from Alaska? Anyway, they might be making this up, but I don't see why they would. Nobody elected Elon Musk, so I understand the concern here. Yes, they elected Donald Trump, but there's no specifics about how much control Elon would have over the government prior to the election. So Republicans have asked the White House for clarity about what's going on. They haven't got much. And mark my words, if Democrats take control of either chamber of Congress, which the House is more likely, there is absolutely going to be an investigation over this. Guaranteed. And it wouldn't shock me if they try to impeach Donald Trump over this. It'd be stupid because one, this would be the third impeachment, and two, removing him would only make J.D. Vance the president, and therefore he would be able to run in 2028 as the sitting president instead of the vice president. Then a federal judge thankfully blocked Doge, removing their access to Treasury Department records, which has very sensitive information about American citizens like you and I. If Doge really wants to cuss wasteful fat, how about the wasteful fat that the billionaires themselves are eating off of all of us? For example, why don't they cut the carried interest loophole, or raise capital gains taxes, or remove the step up in basis, or crack down on offshore tax havens, or about allowing homeowners to deduct the interest on their mortgage? Like, that should absolutely not be a thing. If you buy a house, you should be paying for the interest. And right now we treat it like a charity. You donate to a charity, you get a tax break. You donate to yourself by deducting the interest, you also get a tax break? Like, what? And that makes no sense. Or my second least favorite, the SALT tax deduction. That affects all of us. Yes, we all benefit from the state and local tax deduction, which is what it stands for, but that also shouldn't be a thing either. It allows states to raise taxes as high as they want because, well, there is a cap, but to raise taxes as high as they want, and then we can just deduct it, which allows states to raise taxes. They basically take the federal government's revenue. And that's okay because people can just write off the taxes. And my favorite is probably the Social Security cap. That shouldn't be a thing either. If you make more than $168,000 a year, that income is not taxed. For the extra income is not taxed for Social Security purposes. If we abolish the cap, it would fund Social Security for 75 or more years, and it would raise over $1 trillion in 10 years. To raise the cap to $250,000, which is probably more politically realistic, it would cover about 70% of Social Security's shortfall. So we would extend the life of Social Security for a little bit longer and make it slightly more sustainable. All of these favor high-income blue states and the residents that live there. So Republicans should absolutely target these. And of course, I don't think raising taxes is what DOGE is looking to do. But let me be clear, their plan to cut $2 trillion off the federal budget, which I think they recently walked away from, is not possible. Can't be done. Even if we don't touch Medicare or Social Security, since those are politically toxic, what's left? Well, there's the Defense Department. We could cut the entire department. We could reduce it to zero. We would have no military. And then that would be gone. And then we'd have to get rid of our income security, housing programs, NASA, national parks, post office. We'd have to get rid of all of that. The government would basically be completely gutted. So $2 trillion is not happening. $1 trillion isn't even going to happen. Even I would say $500 billion is not going to happen. This brings me to the question of, is Trump doing a good job? Well, I'm going to leave that up to you. Clearly, there's some law breaking going on here, but there are some ardent supporters would say, his ardent supporters would say this is exactly what they wanted and he's fulfilling the will of the people. Will I say that? There is some truth to it, but even if some of Trump's actions are declared illegal, it is going to take the time for the courts to get to accept and to hear the case and rule on them, which could, if left in place in the interim, could allow the administration time to accomplish some of what they want. However, I think nobody anticipated the speed at which Trump would move, certainly not myself. Anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe and please share to your family and friends. It's greatly appreciated. So thank you, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.